Hello again, everyone. This is Rod Courtney, and I'm your host of Tailgate Topics, the podcast brought to you by the IP Magazine and Utility Business Media. Today, we welcome back Jesse Hardy. Jesse is a certified safety professional, a certified industrial trainer, and like a lot of us, a certified utility safety professional. Jesse's the Chief of Safety and Training for Freedom Solar. It's great to have you back, Jesse.
Rod, it's great to be here. I thank y'all for having me.
Hey, man, it's always good to talk to you, buddy. Yeah, you did another tailgate topic for us for the IP Magazine, and this one is titled "Strategies to Handle Workplace Conflict." And I'm gonna be honest with you, when I first read that title, I was thinking about conflict, physical conflict, or arguments between employees. But in reading it, I found out that's not what it is. There's so much more to workplace conflict than I really even thought. And you did a great job. You broke it down into actually two different sections, right? The first section is what can go wrong and what to do about it. And then the second section is how to identify the issues before they happen. So let's just dive right in, man. Talk to me about the first part of it.
Well, it's a couple of things. One, like you said, it's not just employees. Now, employees do get into conflict, but for what we do on the right of way, my goodness, man, it can be landowners as well. In fact, I've actually seen bigger issues with landowners back when I did right of way, either pipelining or the overhead transmission civil part of the clearing. So either between the landowners and the employees, we can have all kinds of issues. And kind of when we look at landowners, how do they really get in the way and how are they a problem? Well, one, they can get in the way. They're either out on our work sites or they're putting themselves or our workers in danger. And something else, they could be distracting our workers. Our crews are out there having to be on constant lookout for unauthorized people in certain areas. And we all know where those hotspot areas are. We know the landowners that, I don't want to say they're crazy, but they're definitely problematic from time to time. There could also be property damage from landowners that are upset. Landowners are members of the public. They could damage our equipment and protest. I saw this more, I think, when I was in oil and gas building pipelines. They would actually get out there and drill holes in the pipe. Wow. Which, if your goal is to have a good pipeline, that's not the way to do it. But hey, they could also occasionally you get some threats of violence, man. On rare occasions, you can get threats of violence. I remember one time, probably 15 years ago, I was on a right of way with pipeline, got a call from the superintendent. And he said, "Hey, Jess, can you head out to this road crossing over there? The road bore crew, man, they're shut down. They took off. There's a landowner out there with a shotgun. And I figured I'd send you in to go check it out." And I said, "Well, how about we call the police?" He's like, "Well, I was thinking I'd just send in the Marine and let him see what we needed to do."
Yeah, no. That reminds me of a story, though. Years ago, I was working for Siemens and we were building wind turbines. And this was kind of early on in the wind boom, around 2006, 2007 back then. And we're in Abilene, Texas, building these wind turbines. And back then, the way they did it was, the landowners that we were building them on got some profits from every turbine on their property. And depending on how much electricity it produced as to how much profit they made. Some of these guys had, 40, 50 turbines on their property. And we're out there one day, we've got a lattice boom, 400-ton crane with about 300 foot of boom in it and a jib. And, we're all, just standing back, big construction zone. And sure enough, man, I look over my shoulder and I couldn't make this up. There's a guy standing there in a white wife beater T-shirt with cut off jeans, cowboy boots, and a six shooter hanging on his side. And something it was like something out of a cartoon. And I asked him, I said, excuse me, whoa, sir, excuse me, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I'm just watching y'all build my turbine. And well, I'm gonna have to ask you to go sit back on your porch and watch it, sir. But yeah, man, landowners can definitely get in your way.
Yeah, man. So yeah, that is, they get in the way, they're distracting, they can do damage, or they can actually threaten you. So kind of, what do we do about it? Well, there's kind of two types of things we got to, or two ways we can approach it depending on the situation. One is for nonviolent issues. The other is for threats of violence. But, starting with those nonviolent issues, stop work in the area. If anybody's in danger, if it gets to the point where they're just so distracting, just stop the work. And then respectfully, speak to that problematic person and just advise them of the issue that you're facing. And then, you might have to contact the appropriate client representative, the utility about the issue. And then you can return to work when it's safe to do so. So that's kind of how we handle those nonviolent folks. Rod, did you ever you got a good story about the nonviolent ones that were just funny?
We constantly, especially in that part of Texas, we did a lot in Iowa and North Dakota. And again, we're, these wind turbines, you're out in the middle of nowhere, man. And
yeah,
we had some children of the corn moments where, yeah, some really crazy stuff happened. But we were on one in Iowa, and we had guys up inside the nacelle, which is the big generator portion of the turbine, and they were building it out, and kept hearing these. It sounded like someone dropping a handful of marbles every minute or two. I'm to find out they had some hunters that were shooting at the tower. They didn't know people were in it, but they were shooting at it with a shotgun from a distance. So yeah, we had to get the local police involved and all kind of stuff for that one.
I remember one time I just pulled in and I just joined a project, and the other safety guy was taking me around, and there was a protester. So we're cutting trees for the right of way. And a protester had made a pallet kind of treehouse thing that was suspended by a rope. And she's up there and she's planning on staying there. She's got like a tarp over, and she's got a bucket to pee in and stuff like that. So we got the cops out there. And we were getting her down, and then all of a sudden she picked up that bucket and the cop was down below.
No.
And I remember he said, "Young lady, we can end this pretty peacefully and it'll be okay. But you throw that bucket on me, it's going to go a whole different way."
Ah, my goodness. I would have tased her.
Oh, man. She was up there pretty high, too.
I'd have tased her right out of that tree.
Yeah. And if we had cut the rope, it would have been a bad day. But
yeah.
We got her down. So, those are the kind of nonviolent folks. But, for the threats of violence, like the guy running, it's not even really a threat of violence. The guy with the 6-shooter, it turned out the guy with the shotgun was actually just quail hunting. He was just walking around in the desert quail hunting. But, for the real threats, like we've had those before, guys with AR-15 saying you ain't coming on my property. And, for that, hey, man, you just stop work in the area. You again, respectfully advise the person, that you're going to secure your operation. You're going to leave the area. I'm just going to make it safe and I'm going to leave, so that hopefully de-escalates it a little bit. And then you do it, you secure the operation, the equipment, and you get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
And then you definitely contact the appropriate client representative and ask them to call the police if you don't call them yourself. And then again, you just return to work whenever it's safe to do so. And there's been times where, heck, man, cutting trees out in Pennsylvania, there was a maple grove we were cutting that we had to have. We had federal marshals out there with AR-15s keeping us safe. But
crazy.
Yeah,
I spent 3 years in Iraq as the HSC manager for the LogCap 3 project. And when you're in an environment like that, you expect things like that, right? You expect, we call them insurgents, but, in this case, they're, American citizens. But when you're back here at home, you're a Marine. You understand what I'm saying. When when you go into a combat zone, your mind is different. You expect certain things. When you come back and you're in, Willy Wonka, Pennsylvania somewhere, and you're out in the woods, the last thing you expect is somebody to come up with a rifle or a handgun threatening to kill you to get off the property.
Yeah, it is, man. But it does happen, and people get upset. The people are they can get crazy about land and things like that.
Yep. So that the last question on this part of it was, why is worker-to-worker conflict resolution important? Talk to me about that.
So unsettled worker-to-worker conflict, man, it can momentarily steal your thoughts as we think about the issue. It can distract us from our work by getting us all riled up, which can make us mentally and emotionally unfit for duty. And kind of the way I define fit for duty is it's physical, but it's also mental and emotional. So you need to be physically fit and you need to be mentally focused and emotionally stable to be fit for duty. And you know what? Other than that, it just creates an environment that causes good workers to leave. And those who remain, well, the bad eggs, they just recruit more miserable workers because, like my grandmother said, birds of a feather flock together. So the bad folks bring in more bad folks.
Yeah.
And it can lead to physical violence, man. It can turn into workplace violence. So
absolutely.
Those issues are big.
That's not good. A good environment for anybody. It's not safe. It's not emotionally healthy. That's a terrible way to go. But yeah, creating an environment that causes workers to leave and things like that you're going down a rabbit hole there that you definitely don't want to do. So, well, good. So now we're getting into the second half of this, where, like I said, this is where you talk about the issues or fixing the issues before they happen. What do we need to have in place? What do we need to do to head this kind of stuff off ahead of time? So, addressing areas of conflict is what it's titled. But Tell us about that part of it.
There's kind of three general areas. One deals with we got conflict because there's poor communication. Another one is we got conflict out of frustration. And then lastly, there's just differences of personalities or values. You got different folks with different strokes. But looking at the communication issue, you just start off to fixing this and maybe even preemptively, identify the issues by listening, listen for key phrases like, hey, man, I thought you wanted it like this and not like that. Or no, hey, nobody had told me the plan had changed. Those are indicators that we got a communication issue. And we can prevent those, by being clear and specific and checking for understanding. And checking for understanding, I think about the tailgate meeting. Yeah, sure, man. You ask questions during the tailgate meeting or the pre-job brief, but where you really check for understanding is when people start working. As the supervisor, you get out there and you look and you say, you ask yourself, are they doing what we just talked about? And if they're not doing what we just talked about, well, obviously there's a communication issue. So, how do we fix the issues? Well, we stop work in the affected area. And these four things are going to be across all three of these areas that we have conflict. We stop work in the affected area. We don't want to let this be a hazard. And then we take a breath and we calm down. If you're getting worked up, just take a breath, calm down, focus on the solution and not the issue. And I can't tell you how, when I realized that, when I started focusing on the solution instead of the issue, especially as a safety guy, man, we started having cultural change hand over fist. I mean, it was really good. Focus on the solution, not the issue. And then clarify those expectations or needs. So those deal with poor communication. And, Rod, as you think about all the incidents that you've investigated over the years, man, how often do you think it's just communication issue?
I was sitting here jotting down couple of notes, and I was going to ask you something very similar. And at the end of the day, and this goes for all of safety, not just this, the subject we're talking about today, I can't tell you, it's an unbelievable percentage of incidents that occur, problems on the job site, additional cost, quality issues. And I could list it, just keep listing it, but it all stems back to poor communication. If there was one thing that if we could fix it as an industry, and it would make the biggest impact, without a doubt, if we could eliminate poor communication, that one thing would make it would do away with a lot of our jobs. But that's huge, man. Communication is the backbone to almost everything.
I've kind of developed a framework over the past 10 years or so I call purpose and principle driven. And there's 8 principles, and one of them is communication. Now, that got started because of us thinking about all the failures, all the incidents I'd investigated. But what I realized as I kept going is, man, if you do these 8 things right, of which communication is the main one that goes across all of it, you have success, overwhelming success. And yeah, like you, man, I'd say of all the thousands of incidents I've investigated, I bet you 95% of them deal with communication. If it's not the direct cause, it's definitely the indirect cause, contributing factor.
Without a doubt, communication more times than not plays a role somewhere, somehow.
Yeah. So that's the communication one. Frustration is often, that's a big one out there, especially when it's super cold or super hot. You've got some tough conditions. And what we want to do with frustration is we want to identify the issues. Maybe it's a lack of resources or some sort of unrealistic expectations. And when we hear these key phrases, such as you hear workers say, hey, I needed that, or I need that, or hey, there's no way we can do that, but no one will listen to me. Or maybe it's even, I just expected more of myself. Maybe it's not external. Maybe it's internal. Somebody's putting expectations on themselves that's leading to frustration. And I guess the way we prevent these issues is being realistic and adjusting the job plan when there isn't enough time, staff, equipment, or materials, or by not just imposing unrealistic expectations on ourselves, or we just got to be clear and specific. And, I used to call this unfunded mandates. I was a school teacher for a time back when No Child Left Behind came out. And, they just set these expectations, but they had no funding to actually do it. And oftentimes our frustration comes because the project we're on, man, it just doesn't have the resources we need to meet the expectation. And the way we fix those issues is, like I said before, like the big 4 is stop work, take a breath, calm down if you're getting worked up, focus on the solution, not the issue, clarify the expectations, make sure I actually understand, make sure it is an unrealistic expectation. Maybe it's not. Maybe I just don't know what they really want. And then lastly, develop a joint plan to use the resources you got. And maybe that includes adjusting the expectations. Rod, how'd you see frustration, when you were boots on the ground back then?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head. So much of it has to do with the environment. And now when I say environment, first of all, the actual environment, how hot is it? How cold is it? Those 2 things affect people's mental faculties more than you can imagine. I built wind turbines in North Dakota when it was 25 below zero. And I don't care who you are. You stay out there for any length of time and you're not in a good mood. And then, on the opposite end of that, I was in Qatar in the middle of summer. And
oh gosh,
it was we had one of those thermometers, the round ones, it looked like a clock, but it's a thermometer hanging on a tree. And 130 is where it went to, and it was pegged out. So, I mean, when you walk outside, you lose your breath. because it's so hot. Same thing on the cold side in North Dakota. You walk outside and it's like, oh, my lungs burn from breathing. You know, from that type of environment to, like we were talking about earlier, what type of environment, or let's say culture, do you have on your job site? You know, what are the people that virus, that, you know, just negative Nancy all the time kind of thing? Because I don't care. That person, it will bring the rest of your job site down. When if you have one of those that are just constantly moaning and groaning and something's wrong, you know, all the time, they're going to bring your job site down. There's the only way you can fix it is to counteract it with more positive stuff. But it's so hard. But yes, I've seen the frustration because, and big one, like you said a minute ago, is the funding. You know, we're safety guys, right? And you know, a lot of people listening to this can relate to this. Now, most companies will tell you how, you know, safety is so important. It's a value. It's a number one priority, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
But when the job gets tight, more times than not, what's the first thing they start cutting? You know?
Yep. Safety and training.
Yeah, exactly. We can do without that. And you know, the thing is, until, you know, training, like you said, but until you have an incident like Monday Night Football the other day, right? Do you realize how many people in the last week have gone to take a CPR class? Because
I can imagine.
You know, so it's the same thing. You know, you haven't had any incidents, you haven't had anything happen, so you know, start cutting back on the safety and the training and all that, and then something happens. Which creates even more frustration, and it's an endless cycle. But
go ahead.
No. I'm just going to say, you know, it's, you know, you called it the big four a second ago, and all three of these last ways to head this stuff off start with the same 3 or 4 things, right? Stop. It is. Take a breath, deep breath. Do some yoga or Zen stuff, something, calm down. Because if you don't, then every decision you make from then on out is not going to be correct. In BUDS, in Navy SEAL training, they teach what's called 4 square breathing. And it's a way to calm down. And just real quick, it's actually pretty simple. It's, you know, you inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and leave it out for 4 seconds. And then inhale again, and just keep doing that. And that will actually slow your heart rate down, lower your blood pressure, and help you to calm down. So if that little technique can help anybody out there when you're frustrated and had poor communication, please feel free to use it.
I love that 4 square method. It does work. And, you know, something you mentioned there, that guy, that cancerous person, you know, it's one thing when it's 80 degrees and he or she's popping off. I work now residential solar. 90% of the business is residential solar. So we got 20-year-olds on the roof. And it's hot down south. We're based primarily in Texas. And I was having trouble getting the guys to tie off. So I kind of made a joke about it. I integrated it in. I was like, hey man, it's 100 degrees outside and, you know, you're kind of a jerk, you know, at times, and you pop off to these guys. You might want to tie in because at 100 degrees, they might get tired of you and just try to throw you off the roof. And at that time, you might want to be tied in. So kind of a joke, but not really.
That's another way to look at it, right?
Yeah. If you get them so bad that they want to throw you off the roof, they have a bad moment, you might want to have that rope catch you.
Sorry, boss.
But that gets back into the personalities and values. That leads us, that cancerous person, that person with that Eeyore kind of attitude, you know, those are the ones that really stand out. So differences of personality and values. Not everybody's made the same. Not everybody believes the same stuff. And, you know, we want to identify the issues by just kind of listening for some key phrases. As a leader, just listen for these. Like, he or she's always yelling. He's too sensitive. He just cares about getting home to his family, or she's just waiting for 5 o'clock somewhere. Those are some key phrases that the crew members have got some different different values. And the way we kind of prevent these issues is accepting the fact that we're a family, and every family has that cousin Eddie, off of vacation, cousin Eddie. Everybody's got a cousin Eddie. And we need to deal with that to succeed. And, getting rid of miserable people and their cancerous attitudes, that's important. We want to do that by putting workers together that have similar personalities and values when possible. And maybe by filtering others' words and tones to find out what they're really upset about. And Rod, you may be like this as well, but those most outspoken folks on the job site, the ones that are really kind of jerks, they sometimes say the most profound things. They bring up the actual issues that we need to address. It's just oftentimes they use the words and their tone that we don't hear it, or some people don't hear it. And I tell you, this is another key to safety success, is be able to filter out the words and tones to hear what's really going on inside. Have you experienced that as well with the loudmouths?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, until I started honing in the skill set of leadership, of being a leader, so many of us get promoted through the ranks because we're really good at our job. And then, once we get into a position of authority, whether it's a foreman, a supervisor, or, vice presidents or whatever, wherever you end up. But we've never had any training on how to lead people. And in going through that process, over the last, decade or so for me, man, I have absolutely run across people like that. And one of the things that I've learned, and actually, in full disclosure, learned this in probably the last year, is there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And, when you, a lot of the stuff you're talking about has to do with the leader listening. That goes into the psychological safety part of things. And, hey, construction hands, man, leave your feelings at the gate. And, they're just rough and tough. And there's so much more to it now, though. When our leaders, the job site leaders or company leaders will actually listen to what the people are saying, it makes so much of a difference. And then when you do that, you can pick up on certain things and start preventing the issues before they ever happen. And when you do run across Cousin Eddie, and you will, listen.
And I love Cousin Eddie. I love the Cousin Eddies out there. They make life fun.
Absolutely. And I've got a house full of them. Trust me. Heck, I might be one, to be honest with you. But finding those key phrases sometimes, using that leadership skill of listening to what people are saying, not listening to respond, but listening to understand. And when you do that, then, we can wrap it all up with the big four again, right? And you can stop the work and take a breath, calm down, right? Focus on the solution, not the issue. And then, there's, in this one, obviously, if you can influence change in the person to change that attitude, that's great. Do that. But if you can't, then it's time to replace them and get somebody else that's not going to be that cancerous virus on your job site.
Yeah, that is beyond what you mentioned right there. The listening to understand. It reminds me. I study every morning, and I was in the book of James this morning. So, regardless of your faith, there's some wisdom in the Bible. You don't have to believe in the Bible to have some wisdom out of it. James 1:19 says we should all be quick to hear, and slow to speak and slow to anger. And I remember the first time I read that, I don't even think I was with Faith back then, man. I was like, that is profound. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And that solves a lot of these issues. And if we can do that, we do the stop work, we take a breath, we focus on the solution, not the issue. And with these, sometimes you need to rearrange the work crews. There's some folks that there's some folks that can work better with other types of personalities.
Absolutely.
And if that doesn't work, hey man, you cut the cancerous attitudes out. You got to make them a free agent to the industry once again. And you do it not to punish them, but to elevate those that are all around you,
Absolutely.
So,
and
that's kind of
when you're picking the teams, and where I sit in my organization, I have safety professionals out in the field, and I have to match their personalities up with the construction managers. Because like you said, this personality is not gonna mesh well with that one. You're just gonna have problems. But we find the right personalities, build the correct teams, and every member of every team can't necessarily just jump and change teams. Leaders, on the other hand, should be able to adjust. But as you're coming up through the ranks, everybody has their strong suits, their flaws, their personality, some of them quirks. But building that team and like you said, rearranging the crews if needed, that can be a huge help.
Yeah, it does.
Well, man, I tell you what, Jesse, it has been an absolute pleasure, buddy. Thank you so much for all you do for the Incident Prevention Institute and writing these things for us and allowing us to print them out. And then, taking time of your own and spending it with me and talking about this stuff. It has been an absolute pleasure once again, bud.
It's a pleasure to be here again. And I thank you, Rod, and all of Incident Prevention. Y'all are doing a great work. Thank you.
All right, buddy. All right, guys, that's everything for this episode. Listen in next time for a really good safety topic.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.